All right, am I on? Is it working? Can you hear me? Good evening. How is everybody? Good. Hey, Josh. How's Josh and Morgan? Good to see you all. Man, it's good to be here. When Johnny texted me several weeks ago and we began talking about coming back, first thought I had was it hasn't been long since I was there. And time has passed quickly enough that the 2 years that passed were just quicker than I thought they were. And the second thought I had was I love going to Leoma, and I do love coming here. This is a great church from my vantage point, and a lot of you are the kind of people I just enjoy being around. And so thank you for being here tonight. I appreciate you guys for being up front. All right, so is it working? All right, good. I love having the screen at the back. That helps me a lot. So we're talking about finding a mate. So how many of you guys are ready to find a mate? One? Two? You see what a leader you are just by raising your hand. So you have anybody in mind? Maybe. Will you tell me afterwards? You know, this is a tough topic. It's a tough topic because for those of you back here, understanding what it's like to try to talk to this bunch about how serious this is and what really matters in picking out a mate and preparing for that, how do you do that? You know, I sometimes talk about premarital counseling as being similar to teaching a 5-year-old the tax code. And in fact, I met this week with a couple who's been married 3 or 4 months. And I did their premarital counseling. And when I do the premarital counseling, usually on the last session, we will set up a time where we will meet 6 months later. And I tell them, look, when you all come back 6 months, that's when we really can talk about what you need based on your understanding way better than beforehand. Well, so they came in this week and they said, now we understand. Now we get it. This is hard. And they were old enough and had lived by themselves long enough and learned what it's like to live independently. And the whole idea of sharing your life with somebody else where you have to be considerate, where you have to take into consideration their time, your time, how my money is now our money, and all of that stuff. Well, I don't care how hard I try to explain that to them 5 and 6 months ago, you know, it just didn't quite click, and it never does until you're there. And so the difficulty of this topic for these guys is, for most of these guys, the topic of selecting a mate is kind of like, why are you talking to us about adult stuff? You feel like that a little bit? It's kind of like, well, we'll worry about that later. Well, what happens is it slips up on you, and it takes a while. And in fact, I was talking to a good friend of mine Saturday who has 2 adult children, and they're struggling in some ways. And part of why they're struggling is I think they didn't learn early enough how to date, how to have relationships with the opposite sex. And then when they started dating at a later age, they, quite frankly, weren't very experienced. And they didn't know how to take their feelings and what they were dealing with. And so learning how to date, learning how to understand people, learning how to act and to get along with people that you don't always see everything alike. While all this sounds like adult stuff, it's real stuff. And so where I'm coming from tonight, as I set this stage for where we're going, where I'm coming from tonight is kind of looking backwards, because I'm in the counseling room every week with people who are hurting badly, oftentimes because they didn't do this very well. And I'll talk more about that as we go, but we are talking about a tough topic. Now, it is the case that marriage is truly a blessing from God. And look at this passage, and in fact, instead of me taking time to read it to you word for word, look at this familiar passage, and as we look at these, 5 or 6 verses on the first slide, and then the latter 4 or so in the second slide, it is that story of Adam and Eve. And to summarize it, Adam had everything he needed. He was in the Garden of Gethsemane, not the Garden of Eden, not the Garden of Gethsemane. He was in the Garden of Eden. He had all the food he needed. He knew what tree he could not eat of. God had prepared for him the perfect place. However, things still weren't right. And the reason it wasn't right for him was because even with all the animals he had, and even as much as I love animals, and some who have cats might argue with me, but animal companionship's not the same. And Adam was missing something, and so God gave him Eve. And when he gave him Eve, he gave him companionship. Now, the word companionship means an awful lot to me because I've seen my dad try to live for 15 years now without my mom. And he and she had companionship. And there's still half of him gone. And if he could bring her back and have that once again, if I were to ask him if that would be a blessing, what do you think he'd say? Incredibly so, beyond what words can describe. And we all know people, and some of us in the audience tonight are living without our companion. And it's easier the older we get and the more of this we see to understand, oh, now I get it. I understand what God meant when he blessed Adam with companionship. Well, let's look at another passage or two from Ecclesiastes 4, 9 to 12. 2 are better than 1 because they have a good return for their labor. If either of them falls down, one can help the other up. But pity anyone who falls and has no one to help them up. Also, if 2 lie down together, they'll keep warm. But how can one keep warm alone? Though one may be overpowered, 2 can defend themselves. Cord of 3 strands is not quickly broken. That verse is often used in wedding ceremonies where the 3 strands involve the husband, the wife, and the Father, God. But again, marriage truly is a blessing from God. And if we want to turn to Solomon, the wise man, and see what he had to say, we can turn to Proverbs 18, where Solomon said, "He who finds a wife finds a good thing and obtains favor from the Lord." And from the virtuous woman chapter of Proverbs chapter 31, not only is it a good thing when a husband finds a wife, but in chapter 31, the chapter about the virtuous woman talks about what a blessing it is to the virtuous woman who has a husband, who's godly, who's respected, who fears the Lord, who has the reputation of people throughout town, and he is respected because of who he is. And so she has a blessing. Her children also, they rise up and call her blessed, as does the husband. However, even though it is the case that marriage is a blessing from God, picking the wrong mate is far worse than being single. Now, I want you to stop and think about that. And you all cannot imagine what I hear and what I see on a weekly basis, often on a daily basis. Oftentimes one who has lost their spouse and is trying to figure out divorce. Oftentimes children involved and how difficult it is to deal with that and the hurt and the pain that goes along with trying to have a relationship with someone when it's not a good fit. Ruins a good life. Now, I'm going to try to make that point tonight as we go. And I'm of the opinion tonight that the best way I can make this point to you all is this one right here. And that is the wrong marriage, the wrong relationship ruins a good life. It ruins everything. And taking it serious is very important. Now, I want to have a little bit of fun. You get it? Depending on how quickly you laugh tells me how sharp the audience is. Yeah, I can see happiness both places. And this one, I don't remember if I shared that before or not. I may have. That came out in many papers, I guess, from Kansas City, but in the Daily Herald, the Almost Daily Herald, since it's a 6-day-a-week newspaper in Columbia. But it came out a few years ago, and husband and wife had so gotten tired of each other that he finally told her he'd rather be in jail than to live with her, and so he went and robbed a bank and stayed in the lobby of the bank until the police came to get him. And when they did, they asked him why he was still there, and he explained, "I'd rather be in jail than living at home with my wife." Well, that's kind of a little bit of humor in what apparently is a true story that represents the point that I'm trying to make. And it is the case that we're never going to find the perfect one. All right? Now, I want to stop here before I go on and kind of provide a caveat. I always worry anytime we have special emphasis days, and especially when I'm speaking about the importance and blessing of marriage. And it is important and it is a blessing. However, I realize that these lessons are really hard for some. There probably are people in the audience tonight who wanted so badly to find the right person and never did. And it hurts their heart even to hear these lessons. And there are people in the audience tonight who have tried to find the right person and didn't, and it didn't work. And these lessons hurt their hearts. And I'm sorry for that. But I don't want to not speak about how important it is, even though I realize that's the case. But I want you to know that I do understand that's the case. And another thing that I'll say, and I want to continue to say as we go through tonight, and that is this. There is no requirement to find the right mate. It is the case that we have a cultural pressure. And that pressure is it's the thing to do to get out of high school, to go to work or go to school, to sometime in the early 20s get married, and sometime soon after start providing grandchildren for your parents. And now that Tina and I have 3 grandchildren, I understand why that pressure exists. It's the neatest thing in the world, one of them at least. But it is the case that we put pressure on young people thinking culturally they have to do this, and even by a certain time, and if they don't, adults start asking them questions about why they have not. And that's not good. It's not good. Paul himself said, it's way better if you can handle it not to go that route. Now, whether he said that through inspiration or personal opinion, in fact, personal opinion, he said, and exactly to what degree that was supported, I don't know really how to make that point. However, I don't think God would have allowed him to make that statement if he weren't in agreement with it at some level. And so as we continue to go through this, and I got to get going a little faster, I realize, but as we continue to get going with this, I want to be really clear in saying marriage is not for everybody, and we need to be careful about not putting pressure. So my suggestions, these are from what I've seen and kind of where the rubber meets the road. Number one, you got to look for a mate in the right places. That just kind of seems like a no-brainer, doesn't it? But you got to look for a mate in the right places. And if you're not looking in the right places, you're not going to find the right kind of mate. Makes sense, doesn't it? And I'm not of the opinion, as much as Christian education has been a big part of my career and my working and adult life, and even before, I'm not of the opinion that Christian schools are the only place you can find Christian mates. But I think if we try to find Christian mates in places that are unlikely to have Christians at them, then we're probably not going to find Christian mates. And how important it is if we go to state schools to find places where other Christians are going to be. I love Christian student centers at the state universities. My brother-in-law for many years was the Christian student center director in Knoxville at the University of Tennessee. And I saw kids there whose hearts were soft for the Lord and kids who had great faith. And I heard through the years many times of him performing wedding ceremonies of those who went to state schools who found good Christian spouses because they were looking in the right places. But we don't have to wait until we're in college to find the right places to find good people to be around, whether it's potential people to date or whether it's just being around the right kind of people that make it easier for us to do what we ought to do. Number one, look in the right places. And if we're saying things like, I'm having a hard time finding somebody, ask the question, are we looking in the right place? Help me go back. I think I hit it twice. Can you do it for me? I've lost it completely. Yeah. Quit hitting the switch. I could fix this if he'd quit. Left and right, not up and down, right? You're not much help, Josh. Is it stuck? It's the reason I have this. You want me to try it? There it is. All right, thank you. All right, number 2. Physical appearance matters, but don't let it be the main thing. It does matter. If I were to stand before you today and say, don't pay a bit of attention to how they look, first place, you wouldn't listen to me. Second place, I didn't do that. If you see my wife, I picked a very beautiful woman inside and outside. It does matter. And it needs to be somebody that we are attracted to. There needs to be a physical attraction. That's important. It's part of what God did for us. However, if the only thing that matters to us is how they look, then that's going to play out. And I don't mean they're eventually going to get old and ugly. Eventually they will probably get old if they live long enough. But even the most beautiful or handsome person in the world, when it's all about looks, is not enough after a while. Go to Hollywood and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. Why? Well, because they can look however they want to out there. If they have enough money, if they have the right genes, if they go to the gym enough, if they do these things. But after a while, if all that matters is looks, then it's the same old thing. Now, when we do marriage God's way, the older we get, the more attractive we become, or the more attracted we become to our spouse. And to prove that, the couple who came in who's been married 65 years, man, what a beautiful thing. Or the couple who we look at and go, oh, they're so sweet together. They just love each other so much and it's so obvious. When we see that type of beauty, we're seeing beauty that's real inside and outside. And it's even real outside. And yeah, there are wrinkles. Yeah, our bodies don't look like they used to. We change, but that love is deeper and deeper and deeper because it's based not on the exterior. And you know, the truth of the matter is, if we may or even date somebody for a very long time, and the only thing they have is looks, we're going to get tired of that. We're going to get bored with it. Even you all understand that. If the only thing they have is looks, and they don't treat you right, they don't have interests that are similar to yours, they don't like the same things, they're selfish, they're egotistical, but boy, they look good, how long are you going to date them? See, it makes my point for me. I understand standing around and seeing him or her and say, boy, they look good. I get that. We all did that. And as long as we look at that in the appropriate way, of course, we're going to do that. God made us that way. But please don't let that be the main thing. And don't especially don't let that be the only thing. Physical appearance matters, but don't let it be the main thing. Number 3, don't keep dating someone or don't start dating someone who's not going to help you be the person you want to be. You know, this is not rocket science, is it? But we get so caught up in the looks, and we get so caught up in the where are they on the popularity chain, and we get so caught up in the things that in a way we think matter that don't really match our priorities. And it really is pretty simple to stop and say, is he going to help me be the person I want to be? Is she going to help me be the person I want to be? And if he or she is not obviously that person, then there's a problem, right? And we understand what that problem is. The problem is we're either going to have to change them in a major way, and I'll talk about that in a minute, or we're going to be burdened all of our lives with him or her because of being the one constantly who's fighting the wave that's trying to take us in one direction when we're trying to go in the other. And I can give you example after example after example after example of people who would say to you, if they had the opportunity tonight, it's so very hard to live with somebody who doesn't have the same values that you have. It is so very hard. Don't keep dating someone who will not help you be the person you want to be. Now, let me talk for a minute before we go to number 4 about a difficulty with this. There's a real difficulty when we as teenagers are tempted and oftentimes give in to the temptation of thinking, I know what I eventually want to be, but there'll be time later to become that person. Right now I'm going to have a good time. And see, one of Satan's biggest tools, I'm convinced, is that he puts into our minds, I've got plenty of time to get my act together later. Right now, I'm just going to have a good time. But there are all kinds of problems with that. First problem with that is when that's the person we're trying to be, we're going to tend to want to be around people like that. And when we tend to be around people who are sowing their wild oats with us early on in life, then we risk falling in love with them even for the wrong reason possibly, but because we're both at the same place. And then later on, I may decide, all right, I want to get my act together, and they're not at the same place in their desire to want to get their act together. Second problem with that is when we decide there's time later to do what's right, we start developing habits. And in fact, several years ago, I spoke at a youth retreat over in Centerville at Camp Maribah, I think. Is that what that's called? At the camp over in Centerville. And my topic was, be careful, because as teenagers right now, you are forming your addictions. Now, I think that probably didn't work nearly as well as I thought it might work, because the idea of convincing you guys that what you're doing now very much plays into who you will become. But that's what we mean when we say, I'm a product of my environment. And oh, how many times I'm in the counseling room, for example, with people who are addicted to alcohol who hate themselves because of what alcohol has done to them, but they are so controlled by that, they can't stop the control. And they can't change those habits. And one particular couple that I've worked with an awful lot, and the husband that I've worked with for a long time now, he says, and she says, the problem is because of my addiction, I love alcohol more than I love her. Now, that's hard to hear. It's so hard to hear. And she will come back with something like, oh, why didn't I see it then? And then she'll say something like, but then I was doing the same thing that he was, and I thought, well, eventually we'll both change. And so we got married, and I wanted to change, and he didn't. And he kept on and on and on until it became an addiction, and now even though he wants to change, he can't. Now, I love both of them. I truly do. But he's controlled by his addiction. And where did that start? It started by kids who said, I'll have time later to do what I ought to do. Right now it doesn't matter. And while they thought it wouldn't matter, and while they thought they would straighten things up later, they wound up in a place that they just couldn't fix. And I'm still hopeful, but he truly is addicted. Don't keep dating someone who will not help you be the person you want to be. Number 4, find someone whose faith is real. Find someone whose faith is real. Now, I want to talk about what that means. Because when I talk about find someone whose faith is real, I'm not saying find someone who goes to church all the time. That's part of it. It's important. But all of us know plenty of people who go to church all the time who obviously, based on the way they live, their faith is not real. And I'll tell at the end of the lesson in just a few minutes about a conversation I had with Haley, my daughter, one night when she was asking this question. And after being now at Freed-Hardeman in one role or another for 29 years, I guess, I've seen a lot of college students, many of which did a good job of acting like their faith was real. But when it came down to it, it wasn't true, it wasn't real, it wasn't sincere. They were going through the motions. Maybe they liked the attention. Maybe they liked that they were the ones always selected for weekend devos, or they were the ones who could speak very well. And so in a way, they appeared to be people who had big faith. But see, when you get close enough to someone, you know if their faith is real or not. You know what I mean by that? And so when I say with number 4, find someone whose faith is real, I'm talking about someone who loves God and it's obvious more than they love themselves. Someone who's always wanting to do the right thing even though they don't. Find someone who truly cares about others and is not just trying to promote themselves. And look at the bullet that I've given here. And again, it's not rocket science, but it makes an awful lot of sense. When we're dating someone who puts pressure on us to do more physically than we think is right to do, then there's likely a problem in the faith area. Now, I realize that it's hard to know where to draw that line. I realize that the longer you date someone, sometimes the harder it becomes to stop where we need to stop. But what I'm really saying right now is when we date somebody who's trying to get us to do more than we want to do, there's a faith problem there. And especially if we say, I don't think we need to do that. I don't feel okay with that. And if they pressure us especially, oh, wait a minute, it won't hurt, not a big deal, everybody's doing it. Well, there's a faith problem there. And if there's a faith problem there in that way, then once we get married, there are going to be faith problems in other ways, because the same person who disrespects God enough to betray Him and being physical in a lustful, inappropriate way is very, very likely to also betray his or her spouse in an appropriate way, because that person is more about themselves than they are about God. That person cannot be trusted with God, and that person cannot be trusted with another human. Now, I'm not saying people can't change. I'm not saying that this is not a temptation. I understand it is. It's real. But I want to tell you, when people are willing to step over this line, they are willing to step over other lines. And so if we have someone who's professing to have faith, professing to be a Christian, but they're trying to take things farther than they ought to, and especially when we say, God doesn't want me to do that, if that makes no difference to them, then there are going to be other problems later on if we continue that relationship. Number 5, and this kind of follows right in suit. Don't date someone with wandering eyes. And girls, I'm kind of thinking more toward you all than I am the guys at this point, even though it's appropriate both ways. But guys just tend to be more blatant at having wandering eyes. So if you're dating somebody, notice if when the pretty girl walks by, he turns his head. And notice if he does that over and over and over again. Does that mean something? It does mean something. It means you're not good enough. It means he needs to look elsewhere. It means that's a big deal in his heart or in her heart. Now, we kind of tend to laugh things off. We kind of tend to think, oh, well, when we're married, then I'll be all that he wants or all that she wants. We tend to think things will be different, and some things are different. But I want to tell you, if he or she has wandering eyes before you're married, it's not going to stop when you're married. It's going to get worse. Now, if I could get the adults behind you guys to show their support for what I'm saying right now, and if it were appropriate, they'd all stand up and start clapping and saying, yes, listen, please listen, wouldn't you? And I'm not saying, look at how good I am in coming up with this. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying, man, this is true. It is so true. And you know, we're sharp enough that we notice when that happens. Several months ago, I was going to lunch with a man, a Christian man, and we came up to a red light, and we were talking about something, and we were in his truck, and I saw him look over, and he looked back at me, and he looked again, just like that. Well, I looked to see what he was looking at, and you know what he was looking at? Pretty lady. Now, I don't want to go too far in judging him. I understand we all tend to look at pretty people. But when you see that enough, and you see that head turning enough, and those eyes going in that direction enough, pretty good indicator. Be careful about the wandering eyes. Number 6, don't date someone who doesn't know how to respect. And in fact, when I first had this, I first wrote it down as, don't date someone who doesn't know how to respect their parents. And I thought, boy, that sounds like an old fogey if ever there was one. And then what I thought is, what I really mean by this is, notice what level they respect others. And here's why I say that. Because the biggest problem I see with couples who are in trouble could be summed up by saying they have lost or never had the ability to respect one another. Couples who have trouble because they're not respectful. Selfishness is a form of disrespect. Selfishness, self-centeredness. I'm more important and what I want matters more. And if they're not respectful to their teachers, if they're not respectful to their parents, if they're not respectful to the law, if they're not respectful to authority, then they're going to have trouble in marriage respecting their spouse. Now, I'm going to be honest with you guys and say I have no idea if this is making sense. I don't know if these dots are connecting right now or not, but what happens when couples are in the counseling room is he's quit respecting her and he doesn't treat her respectfully. And there was a tendency, there was a personality trait, there was a characteristic in there somewhere, or maybe because they just drifted into it, they learned to not respect whom they should have respected. You know, and I see even outside the counseling room a lot of husbands and wives who simply don't respect each other or treat each other respectfully. Now, respect is a funny thing because we can't really respect somebody that doesn't earn it, but it is also the case that a lot of people treat others disrespectfully when they have earned it. And there are signs that are just little. You know, if I'm your dad and I see this ugly guy that you're holding hands with sometimes tonight, if I see him not opening the door for you, I'm going to go, open the door for her, son. Treat her respectfully. And you're probably going, oh, why is he talking to me in front of all these people, right? Your face is not red, though. I'm proud. We tend to go, I'll back off. We tend to go, oh, wait, that kind of sounds like old-fashioned things. And I get that. I realize you don't have to act like we acted in the 70s. But look for ways that he or she will treat me respectfully. I'll talk more about that in a little bit. Number 7, don't settle. Do not settle. Know what you want. Put together the things that we have talked about tonight, and don't settle. Why? Because settling gets us in trouble. If we have in mind a certain vehicle that we think is going to be solid and stable, and we can't get enough money, and so we settle, what's going to happen? Well, 9 times out of 10, it's going to break down. We're not going to be pleased. We're going to be frustrated. It's not going to be what we want. Maybe we got caught up in the moment. We have buyer's remorse. And the same thing happens in relationships. If we get caught up emotionally or physically, or maybe we feel like we're getting on up in years and there aren't as many around, and we settle, then we're asking for it. Be very strategic. Be very purposeful. Have in mind what you need and what you want in order to be the person you need and want to be. And do not settle. Settling creates problems. Well, I told you I would talk to you at the end about my conversation with Haley, my daughter. So Haley was at Freed Hardeman. She came home one weekend. We were at the supper table, and she was just coming off a terrible relationship. She had dated for a good while a guy who was a Bible major, a guy who went on campaigns, a guy who spoke at campus devos, and for a good while she thought, this is it. He's the one. He's the one. And then gradually over time, little warning signs started coming up, and we started saying, Haley, have you noticed this? That kind of concerns me. And we were trying to be careful, as parents try to be, but we were concerned. And eventually our concerns proved to be true. And so at the supper table that Saturday night, Haley in tears said, "Dad, how in the world will I know? How will I know when I find the right one?" And what she was saying was, I thought I had found him, and I was fooled. So when will I not be fooled? And so I thought real quick, and I pretty much believe God helped me that night by helping me to give her an answer. And I've shared it a lot through the years because I think it's right. And after thinking a little bit, I first said, "Haley, find someone who truly loves God. Find someone who sincerely loves God. They're not going through the motions. They don't do things so that others will see. When you talk to them, when you see them, when you're with them, it is obvious as you look into their heart that their heart is a heart of God, and they're not just pretending. Find someone who sincerely loves God." And then I said, and number 2, find someone who is the epitome of humility. And we talked about that one. And I said, "Haley, when you date somebody or find somebody who's cocky, when you find somebody who always wants to be the center of attention, when you find somebody who wants the pat on the back and is always doing things so that others will see or pat them on the back, then what you're going to have is somebody who's very self-centered and thinks the world revolves around them. And if you've ever lived around somebody like that, it's not very pleasant. And if you've ever been married to somebody like that, it's not very easy. Problem with that is when we're in high school or when we're starting to date, it's that one who's the big dog on the ball field or court, or the one who maybe in college is the smart one who got the full ride and who is going to make all the money. And, you know, the problem is our tendencies and what we look for is to look for that one who's very confident, who's very capable, who's going to go places. However, blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. And I think what Jesus was saying in that beatitude is when you find somebody who's the epitome of humility and has the right values, they're going to go places. And to try to make my point even further before I go on, isn't it great to see a professional athlete who is the epitome of humility? And it's so easy to like them. Case in point, Marcus Mariota. You know anybody doesn't like him? Oh, I know a lot of people who is glad that he was no longer the starting quarterback for the Titans. But do you ever talk to anybody who says, "I can't stand that guy"? I've never heard that. Unless it was somebody who didn't like Oregon when he was in college, maybe. Why do we like Mariota? Why is he a good guy? He's the epitome of humility. At least he appears to be. I've never met him. Name another professional athlete that's quiet, that does their job, that goes about their business. We love being around people who are humble. And we become very agitated when we're around people who are arrogant and cocky. And while we may tend to think that's the one we want to date, that's the one that's going to cause our lives to be awful and miserable if we're not careful. Find someone who's the epitome of humility. Number 3, I said, and finally, in fact, one more, but number 3, I said, and Haley, find someone who worships the ground you walk on every day. Every day. Not just early on, but every day. Now, I've spent a lot of time with people of all ages who have had good and bad relationships. And this is still my definition. If you want a how-to, if you're asking me, I'm saying these 3 things. And when you find someone who fits these 3, I believe you've got it. Now, the fourth thing I said to Haley was, get in a minute. Now it's your responsibility to be the same thing for them, for him. And if Haley today is for Will, these three things, and if Will today is for Haley, and I think they do a pretty good job of these, I think they'll be fine. But if they step away from these three things, or any of these three things, they're going to have trouble. Now, the last thing I want to say before I go the last slide or two is this. If you mess this one up, there's no way for me to describe how ugly it is. I can try. I could spend a lot of time tonight talking about this couple and what happened when they didn't make it, to their children, to themselves, what happened when the lawyers got involved, how they lost everything because of how much it cost, I can talk about the tears that have been shed, the times that people have said, oh, why could I not have seen it before I said I do? And I wish I could take a part of that knowledge that I have in my head and put it in the heads of each one of you tonight. And if I were able to do that, and I've tried to do that tonight, if I were truly able to transpose that from my head to yours, then you would see even clearer than you do from talking about this or hearing me talk about it for 45 minutes why this stuff truly does matter. And in fact, as we were driving down tonight, I thought, what I need to tell these guys is they have something that the majority of the people I see don't have. You know what you have that the majority of people I see don't have? The opportunity to do it right. And oh, what they wouldn't give, oftentimes, for an opportunity to redo it. Well, when we get away from doing things God's way, life gets in a mess. And messes hurt. And it is the case that you need to be wise about who you date, because it certainly can impact the rest of your life. So, strategy matters. Tonight we've talked about the strategy, and I hope that you will do more than just hear it tonight. I hope you'll take these things and look for that one who can help you be what God wants you to be. Tonight we offer the invitation. We know from what we've talked about tonight how important it is to do things God's way, and how easy it is to get things messed up when we don't. And if we're not doing it God's way, then tonight we need to start. If you need to respond tonight by becoming a Christian, no better time to repent of your sins, to confess Jesus, to be God's son, and to be baptized for the remission of your sins. And it may be you just need to come tonight asking for the prayers of this church, saying, I want to be what God wants me to be. Will you pray for me and help me, asking God to help me do that better? If you need to come tonight, we encourage you to come while we stand and sing.